Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I want to talk about where I've been for the last year or so from YouTube. I've gone on a hiatus and I haven't released any content for the last year or so. And the reason behind that is because I've been going through a major career transition myself. Started a new position at WB Games working as a user research manager. All opinions are my own, doesn't reflect that on my employer. And so in this video, I'm going to talk about why I left and why I made this transition, and also the three major takeaways of this journey that I've been on in the last year, and also set some future directions in terms of where this channel is going to be headed in the future. So in 2019, I wrapped up my PhD, and you can see a video of my graduation up here. One of the things that I've gathered during that time was, well, you finish a PhD, what are you going to do with your life, right? And so at that time, I naturally went into academia and worked as a permanent part-time director at a local university in Toronto. At the same time, I had some friends reaching out to me asking me about like, hey, do you offer career coaching services and so on? I have some kids who want to figure out their direction, and being someone who's from education, I started my business in career coaching for youth, and over time that became a career coaching business for adults. And at the same time, the pandemic hit, so it wasn't like anybody was employing at that time, right? I had to build this business online from scratch. And that was really a way for me to feed my family and make ends meet. Because essentially I was working a full-time job on top of a part-time job on top of being a parent for 3 young children at that time. So it was difficult, but you make things work. However, over time, one of the things that I started to think about as the economy was opening up again and companies were hiring again, was like, hey, do I really want to keep doing this, right? So I realized I liked a lot of things about what I was doing. There were also parts that I didn't dislike, and I'm a big believer of adding more things that you like and removing the things that you don't like, because that's pretty basic. It was interesting because in my career coaching business, I started getting clients who are PhDs, and I was able to help them transition into 6-figure jobs at Fortune 500 companies, right? At that time, I already created a whole system on how to make a career transition. A lot of it's from desk research, and a lot of it's we're working with clients and troubleshooting their problems. And I decided to okay, you know what, I'm going to try this myself. So I did exactly what I recommended to you guys to do in videos. So I went to do some informational interviews, and you can see a playlist on how to do that up here. And I spoke to a lot of PhDs who were able to make this transition. A lot of them in the social sciences in particular transitioned to UX research. So at that time, I reached out to a lot of people and, hey, tell me about this UX research thing. And over time, I realized that, hey, wait a second, there's a sub-discipline of UX research called games user research. And one thing that I'm very sure about myself is that I love video games. I've been playing video games as long as I can remember. At first console was Apple II, and probably the first game that I was in love with was Karateka, right? So I go way back. Not as old, as like Space Invaders and Pong, that's real OG stuff. And so if I'm gonna go get a 9-to-5 and a corporate job, I'd rather do it in games. And being a researcher, one of the things that you're really good at is research, obviously, because you learn really quickly. You're almost like a professional learner at some point. So that's what I did. I learned a lot about games user research as a field. I spoke to a lot of people who were in the field, but also people who are not in games user research. So game devs, designers, and so on, because you need to understand their perspective as well when it comes to working with research. So from this transition, I want to share 3 major lessons that I learned from it. So the first major takeaway that I have from this transition is you got to follow your passion, but also be strategic about it. In my case, I had a lot of things that were a fit for this role that I eventually landed in. I had an education background, so evaluating performance was a thing. That's what teachers professionally do. They teach it and then they measure you. The second thing that made a lot of sense was I was a coach, right? I did career coaching for a good 3 to 4 years of my life and helping people attain their career goals. So that makes a lot of sense once you're transitioning into a managerial role. And then the third thing was, hey, there's that research piece that's really useful, academic research, validity, reliability, and understanding what's good research, transitioning it into a game's application purpose. At the end of the day, you got to pursue your passion, but all your previous experiences will build up to what you're good at, and you really want to double down on that. And sometimes if you are a little younger, like if you're in your teens or 20s, then really is going out and trying a whole bunch of stuff to figure out, to increase your breadth, so that you can narrow down like, hey, what are things that you want to double down on? So the key is really to identify what drives you and align it to your passion and the direction you want to head toward. The second major lesson that I learned from this process is really just embracing reinvention and change. If anything, change is constant, right? From working with my clients, one thing that I realized was that you're constantly going to redefine yourself. You know, there were some clients that I worked with for over several years, and when they first made that jump, it was one thing. But then after they got familiar with their new position, their understanding of the field changed so that they want to try something else. So we're constantly going to be re-evaluating and rechecking everything in our career. So when people say like, hey, find your career passion, it's not just like finding that passion, but also constantly redefining and reinventing that passion. I have friends who are in their 50s or 60s, and to this day, they're thinking about their next step. It's a never-ending process. It's about owning that responsibility, being in the driver's seat rather than the passenger seat of your career. And while you're on the driver's seat, you also have to be open-minded about other possibilities and changes. So one major change that's coming right now is obviously the advent of AI and how it's going to redefine fundamentally how humans work in the workplace. How is that going to change? If you are in copywriting, I mean, you're going to be in trouble because AI is really good at that. If you're doing basic code, AI could spit that out in no time with your large language models. So with the changes that are coming, you're also constantly going to be redefining what your career means and pivoting accordingly. So change is inevitable. We have to embrace it and also have to be in the driver's seat and figure out something out that makes sense for your next step and being proactive about it. And the third and final lesson is really balancing your personal and professional life. And for me, one of the things that I realized in this transition was working, 1.5 full-time jobs was tiring. It was exhausting. I didn't have a lot of bandwidth and energy to be present with my wife and my kids. And that was one of the major motivators for me to make this transition. And now that I've made this transition, it's a little better, right? Because I'm not constantly overworked. But at the same time, it's about embracing, hey, the times that you have with the people who are valuable to you. My kids are growing up and I really want to have more time with them. Instead of hustling my face off on an online business, getting that stability of a 9-to-5 was really nice for that. And so in conclusion, I really want to just share that this transition of mine has been an eye-opening experience. I've learned a lot from it. And there's one thing to talk about it in videos, but another thing is experiencing and going through it yourself. And so what does all this mean for the foreseeable future of this channel? Well, first of all, it means that number one, I'm going to be focusing on teaching and creating content that is more about productivity, soft skills, how to deal with change and ambiguity in the future, perhaps some culture pieces. And also, since I'm in the gaming industry, I'm definitely not going to shy away from talking about video games and gaming culture and so on. On the other hand, I'm going to dial down the coaching pieces. So that's why I've removed all the personality tests and PDFs that I've asked people to download before. And the reason is because, well, I really need to reserve that energy for other things, right? Let me know in the comments below what you want to learn more about. I'm always open to new ideas on how to create content that's useful to you. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to get more of my content in the future. Take care, everyone.